Jesus, be the center, be my source, be my light, Jesus. Jesus, be the center, be my hope, be my song, Jesus. Be the fire in the heart, be the wind in these sails, be the reason that I live, Jesus, Jesus. Be my life, Jesus. Be my source, be my life, Jesus. Jesus. Jesus,
yourself pulled in two different directions at the same time? I can remember taking our dog and our friend's dog for a walk, and they saw two things they wanted at the same time, and suddenly I was pulled and thought I was going to be pulled in half. And as Christians, we often feel pulled in opposite directions. In fact, there's probably one subject more than any other that as Christians and as a church, we've felt pulled in opposite directions. And here's Philip Yancey describing his personal experience of tension, of being pulled in opposite directions over this issue. This is what he says. I feel pulled in opposite directions over the money and stuff issue. Sometimes I want to sell all that I own, join a Christian commune and live out my days in intentional poverty. At other times I want to rid myself of guilt and enjoy the fruit of our nation's prosperity. Mostly I wish I didn't have to think about money at all. Wonder if you recognise that issue he's talking about in your own life. And right the way down through church history, the church, just like Philip Yancey, has really struggled over this issue of the right attitude to money and possessions. And sometimes the church has built huge, opulent buildings and said that money and wealth were a sign of God's blessing. And of course you probably know that today there are televangelists around that say owning a fleet of luxury cars and having a private jet, well, that's God's blessing, and they should be allowed to enjoy that blessing. And at other times, people like Francis of Assisi have sold everything they owned and said that real Christian spirituality is about not having personal possessions at all. And so this issue is a really tough one. In one of his books, John Ortberg describes his personal struggle over deciding how much stuff is enough stuff. I really identify with this. He says, can I own a house, a car, 2 cars? If so, what kind of house and what kind of car? How many pairs of shoes is too many? Can I take a vacation that costs $200 but not one that costs $2,000? And I wonder if you identify with that struggle that he's talking about. And we might be able to say that the issue boils down to this. As disciples of Jesus, are we just allowed to pursue money and possessions to our heart's extent? Or is money and possessions the root of all evil and we should minimise what we own? Martin Luther, who was the man who sparked off the Reformation, used to say that as Christians, we're often like a drunk man trying to get on a horse. And first of all, we fall off one side, get back on, only to almost instantaneously fall off the other side. And on this whole issue of money and possessions, we could say that there are 2 sides of the horse that we tend to fall off towards. There's materialism and what we're calling asceticism. Materialism locates our self-worth, our meaning in life, frankly, in our bank balance and what we own, the stuff that we have. And materialism always tells us that having more, that little bit more, would make us feel more fulfilled and that bit happier. Jesus has an absolutely devastating critique of materialism for those of us who are his disciples. Just listen to that critique now.
Matthew chapter 6, beginning to read at verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.
So there, what Jesus was saying is that materialism, serving mammon, living for treasure on earth, makes us money-centred and stuff-centred rather than God-centred. It displaces God at the centre of our life. And Jesus says, really directly and upfront, you can't make money and stuff the centre, the driving force of your life, and simultaneously serve God. So what he's saying is that materialism and discipleship, they're like oil and water. They don't mix, they're incompatible. Now the opposite side of materialism that we fall off towards as Christians when it comes to money and possessions has been called asceticism. So materialism says that meaning in life comes from how much stuff we have in money. It's from the physical part of life. Asceticism says the opposite. It says that rather than having as much as we have, we should have as little as we can. We should minimize what we own if we want to be serious followers of Jesus. And it says, at its most extreme, that it's not spiritual to take pleasure from anything physical. And so asceticism is about self-denial, basically denying yourself any pleasure from anything physical. Now in church history, it's often linked to monasticism. So you might know that monks and nuns, depending on their order, take vows of poverty and they renounce all personal possessions. So what are we going to say about asceticism? It sounds spiritual, but is it? We need to do a little bit of thinking about this. One biblical scholar makes this comment about asceticism and the Old Testament. And stay with me as I read this quote. The entire fabric of the Old Testament argues against asceticism. The Jews did not labour under the notion that the physical world was all bad and that God was not in it. On the contrary, they saw material things as from the hand of God, a father's loving supply for his children. He was the Lord of harvest, the Lord of life. And as his grateful children, they celebrated at national feasts to rejoice in his material provision. And in the process, frivolous as it may sound, they had a great deal of fun. Now, when it gets to the New Testament, Jesus certainly talked about denying ourselves. And as we saw, he rejected materialism. He told some people to sell everything that they owned to escape being enslaved by their possession. But Jesus clearly enjoyed life and took pleasure in the things of life. In fact, Jesus was so often seen at dinner parties that he was called a wine bibber and a friend of sinners. The Pharisees consistently complained that Jesus' disciples didn't fast as much as John's disciples. And as far as the Pharisees were concerned, Jesus and his disciples, well, they just weren't ascetic enough. And Paul, probably responding to some extreme ascetics called Gnostics in 1 Timothy, calls them hypocrites and liars. And he responded to their teaching about rejecting and enjoying the physical things of life by saying God has created everything good and nothing's to be rejected. 1 Timothy. I want you to think about a scale. So materialism is about everything in life is about what you own. Asceticism is about rejecting it. A scale of 1 to 10. Where do you fit at the moment? If we are honest, I suspect the greater danger for most of us here in Switzerland, well, it's the material side of things, isn't it? Materialism is probably the bigger danger for us. What I want us to think about is, well, how do we stop ourselves falling off the horse either side? And what we really need is some guidance in setting our priorities in life. And what I want you to do is think about the hub of a wheel. Now, when you think about it, the hub is at the centre of the wheel and everything else revolves around it. Now, all of us have a hub in our life. Something at the centre of our life that everything else revolves around. And here's what I think. If we get the right hub at the centre of our lives, if we get the right thing at the centre of our lives, then the things that revolve around it, money and possessions, will be in their right place. And then we'll be able to stop falling off this horse at one side or the other when it comes to things like money and possessions. Now, the good news is that Jesus tells us exactly what should be at the hub in our lives as his disciples. In Matthew 6, first of all, as we've seen, Jesus warns us about materialism. And he goes on to tell us about what should be right at the centre of our life. And what it should be at the centre, he says in Matthew 6:33, it's going to help us clarify our priorities. And he says these words that you probably know very well. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Now, those words, seek first, well, that's a language of priorities, isn't it? It's asking us to put something first in our life, something at the centre. And Jesus is saying that we've got to prioritise things, and it's not owning stuff, and it's not rejecting everything. Rather, it's about putting the kingdom of God first in every area of our life. We have to prioritise the kingdom of God. That's what's to be the hub at the centre of our lives. Now, you might remember just a couple of weeks ago when we were thinking about the Lord's Prayer, we defined the kingdom of God by saying that a kingdom is where a single will and way holds sway. It's about living for God's priorities by God's values. The kingdom of God is where God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. And Jesus is saying that's what we have to make the priority in our life. We have to prioritise God's will, God's way of doing things in our life as it is in heaven. And essentially Jesus is saying to you, make my priorities your priority. Because if you read the Gospels, Jesus' priority was the kingdom of God. Make my kingdom your priority. Allow me to reign in your life. And his righteousness, by the way, is about living out and living in the kingdom of God. That's how we live righteously. Let me just tell you, this is the key decision faced by every disciple of Jesus. Will we or won't we make Jesus our Lord? Will we or won't we seek first his kingdom in our life? That is the decision that confronts every single disciple of Jesus. That's the biggie when it comes to discipleship. And Jesus says that when we do that, when we put the kingdom first, that God will add all these things to our lives. Now, I've got to warn you that there is some frankly terrible teaching around this idea of putting the kingdom first and getting all of these things. I don't have time to go into it all now, but I want to tell you that in the context here of Matthew 6, Jesus is promising that God will cover the necessities of our life. That's all these things. It's nothing to do with what you'll hear from some televangelists, that if you send them money, that's seeking first the kingdom, then God will give you all these things, and that could be a luxury car or the house of your dreams. And that kind of teaching, frankly, is just trying to sanctify selfishness, and it's out of line with the Bible. I want to end by asking you very directly a couple of vital questions. How will you answer these questions? Because this will reveal whether you are or whether you aren't living with the kingdom of God at the centre of your life, guiding your priorities.
Good is it to gain the whole world but lose your soul? What good is it to make a sweet sound but remain proud? In view of God's mercy, I offer my all and take my life, let it be everything of me. Here I am, use me for your glory. In everything I say and do, let my life honor you. Here I am, living for your glory. The road I'm on, it leads nowhere without you, and the life I live, it finds meaning in surrender. In view of God's mercy, I offer my all and take my life, let it be everything over me. Here I am, use me for your glory. In everything I say and do, let my life honor you. Here I am, living for your glory. Singing first the kingdom, singing first the kingdom of my Lord. Singing first the kingdom, singing first the kingdom of my Lord. And take my life, let it